The secularization of American social, cultural, political life is rapidly breeding disaster. But the public education system, they always do this. The liberal public education system, and many even conservative talking heads like to relegate discussions of secularization to merely discussing the benefits of it. I'm not going to do that here, Secularism, like any other political idea, is not entirely positive one. It doesn't have entirely positive effects. If anyone is telling you that something is entirely positive and the only positive effects is they're spewing propaganda. That's just plain and simple. In fact, I actually believe the evidence and historical trends of civilizational cycles points to the fact that secularization has actually laid a foundation that could spell America's demise and ultimate collapse like it does every other civilization if we're not careful. If you're even vaguely familiar with right-wing politics, or even if you have a neocon uncle, you've probably, heard that America was founded on Christian values, or America is this Christian nation, which is actually very true. It's very true. Historians have acknowledged this for centuries until like 2 minutes ago. But anyways, and also just look at the religious demographics of our country until mass immigration. Also, the fact that the American Revolution is the direct effect of religious revival in the Western world, this Great Awakening, all of this kind of stuff. Whatever it may be, America is a Christian country. But the woke folks then came in about like 10 years ago, and they start teaching that the founding fathers, they were actually refugees fleeing religious persecution. And really, what this country is all about was religious tolerance and creating a system where Muslims, Christians, Hindus, and gay people could all, get around the campfire and sing campfire songs. If you can't tell by my sarcastic tone, this is a very false narrative. John Adams literally said that this Constitution is made only for a religious and moral people. It's wholly inadequate to the government of any other, during a time in which the country was 99.2% Christian, and the remaining 0.8% were Jews. But, that's a different story. And the Founding Fathers built this country on Protestant religious values, fused with Aristotelian philosophy of the organization of the state. This is what the foundation of our country is. And, I can already hear the libs screaming through their phones, but my separation of church and state. Dude, the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause are literally just to protect from the state from endorsing a specific denomination, and protects against state coercion to believe. It's not this thing that says Christians can't be in politics and any mention of God needs to be destroyed. That would be a ridiculous assertion. Our forefathers came here so they could worship Christ as they saw fit, not so the Satanic Temple could put up a demon statue in the Iowa State Capitol. I mean, how crazy is that happened? And then they arrest the guy Michael Cassidy for taking it down. God bless him. The Wolff Pack stands with Michael Cassidy. But anyways, the idea that the Founding Fathers would in any way support, putting up a satanic statue in the Capitol is ridiculous. That's not the point of this video. The main point is this. As civilizations tend to remove their religious foundation, all moderating factors ensuring peace and cooperation are removed, and the whole tower just comes crashing down altogether. And America will be no different. So buckle up, Wolff Pack. We're getting into it. Enjoy. Good evening, Wolff Pack. Welcome back to the channel. I am Carson Wolff. I am a college student. I love conservative politics, philosophy, Christianity, and history. And I talk about all of those on this channel. So if you like to do the same, please consider pushing that like button, or maybe even subscribe or something, as my buddy Josh says. I think that's Josh who says that. But anyways, I hope you all are doing well. I hope you had a great Christmas. I hope your New Year is holly jolly, because we are going to get into a very, very important topic. It's something I think a lot of people on the right recognize when we look around, and even a lot of atheists or non-religious people experience, but don't necessarily recognize, and they can't put it into words. People need religion. And secular society just sucks. It sucks. But why is this, A lot of people can't quite put their finger on it. Why does secularization always hollow out a culture? Why does secularization always end in catastrophe? And what is the secular crisis in America? We will be discussing all of this and more. Also, as a disclaimer, just a lot of this video is inspired by a book that's written by Pat Buchanan. It's called The Death of the West, which you guys should check it out if you want to understand this topic further. When we're looking at this, we need to understand first the unique political culture of secular society in America. Let's go back to the first half of the 1600s. The 30 Years' War is raging. This massive war has consumed all of Europe as Protestant and Catholic European Christians Christians they're going ham, just slaughtering each other. And, by the end of this century, by the end of this conflict, every nation in Europe was just utterly decimated. Populations in several nations were halved in some cases. Like in Germany, entire generations of men were lost to history. Famine racked Europe, diseases spreading like a wildfire, and the balance of power in Europe is shifted. So to put it simply, when people come back, the Europeans, all these nations, they have PTSD. These shell-shocked nations eventually were just like, can we stop killing our fellow Christian Europeans? So then in this attempt to prevent this kind of horrible conflict from happening again, the European leaders pushed for coexistence between Lutherans and Catholic Europeans. And this is what became the foundation of the new philosophical tradition, culminating with Rousseau, which became known as Liberalism, which came from the Enlightenment, which is a reaction to the war. And this period of secularization of liberalism is defined by coexistence between the various Christian denominations, and also Jews, in parentheses. And this is what is called the liberal secular era. So liberalism was an outgrowth of Christian philosophy. It posits this worldview that is based on individual freedom, where they're observing universal Christian preconceptions of man's state of being with certain God-endowed rights. It put forth this worldview that put Christianity on the individual level, so it could be protected from their leaders and their monarchs and whatever, so as not to lead to another war between the various Christian sects. So liberalism is entirely reliant on the worldview and cultural values of Christianity. It can't survive without it. When Christianity declines, liberalism becomes something just entirely different. It's unrecognizable, which was seen during the rise of things like fascism and communism. But with the defeat of fascism, liberalism just dropped certain features that appealed to the fascistic worldview, like intuition, like passion, genetics, and authority. Just these became very taboo subjects, even though these are things that human society needs. Human beings have always needed this. And now we're in this place where we find ourselves in the 21st century. We find ourselves not being able to argue for the value of things like the nation, gender, culture, or religion that have been essential for every other era in history. John Doyle has a great video on this I'll link up here. But the second half of the 20th century began this new wave of secularism that was defined by strict separation, where religion is viewed as dangerous to society, even though it's literally what created it in the first place. This is precisely where the secular crisis trend begins, and it's what America's going through right now. It's this trend that occurs within the empires of great as they are hollowed out of their guiding religious outlook that produced their culture, their sense of thumos, of masculinity, of courage, and the warrior spirit altogether. The first stage is always the same. You get this period of great stability. You get this where the empire's hegemony leads to this increased consumption and rise in materialism, just a population boom. And then the second stage is the increased secularization, the death of God. As a result of this, the nation's people and their masculine class of leaders, they lose a sense of higher order and reverence to the things that their parents honored, to God. And once this happens, the moral structure that this society was reliant on for this religious outlook begins to decay. As these new generations replace the old ones, the next phase is this female sexual liberation. And Nietzsche talked about this a lot, where because we give up our belief in God, then we become deviant, looking for pleasure down below instead of from above. And this directly leads to phase 4, which the fighting age men become very disenfranchised by the society, which actively turning against them. So they no longer want to fight to maintain social cohesion or the order in society. And then we get phase 5. With no men gathered enough to be enforcers of the social order, society breaks down. And then in the fallout, the nation becomes this low-trust society where nobody wants to talk to one another. Chaotic and exploitative actors are trampling over society. This makes people just reluctant to interact with new people or engage in social associations. This leads to society splitting into different factions because they're not interacting with one another, because they're trying to push each other, their own faction, to victory because they feel like these atomized individuals. And then from here, the society either falls to a period of Caesarism or it collapses into anarchy and barbarism. And I see our society, which is based on liberalism, as being really vulnerable to this kind of cycle. Our entire political culture is the product of classical liberalism. Classical liberalism is the byproduct of the Faustian individualism, which is also the byproduct of Protestant Christianity mixed with Anglo-Saxon cultural values. If we continue to secularize, our entire way of life is going to be uprooted, and not in a good way. What I think we can learn from history is that where society's liberal push for freedom overextends beyond the religious nature of that society, it can end up eroding that entire society's social structure as it becomes atomized, as people become individuals. Because I look at early American settlers and the society that they had built here, in the European societies, they were able to have their liberal and free society because they were extremist Christians by today's standards, and they were communal, united by people and creed. They had high social trust and strong cultural values that united that entire community. That same kind of free and liberal society the Founding Fathers had today would be a powder keg. It's because without those prerequisites of high social trust and a governing Christian outlook, people in the West, specifically in Anglo-Saxon communities, they become atomized individuals and broken families that are dependent on a nanny state as they give themselves over to radical ideologies, trying to fill this hole that's inside their heart where God and His church should be. People need religion. And I think the most worrying effect that secularization has on societies, it always produces, is the destruction of social trust in the family. Family structure shapes entire nations and civilizations, and family structure is entirely reliant on religion and culture. Christianity has shaped our entire understanding of marriage in the West, and it's driven our political culture. I'm sorry if you don't like that fact, but it's just true. And liberalism offers no religious view of the world, so it's wholly incapable of preserving family structure apart from religion, which is why in recent years, as Christianity has declined, the family structure has been the target of these left-wing political movements. And also, the destruction of the family, may I mention, is horrible demographically for nations. It breeds their decline. The decline of the Christian faith contributes to low birth rates and the erosion of America's family structure. The weakening of religious values is intertwined with family dynamics and demographics, which has catastrophic consequences for a nation's future if it's not taken care of. You look at secularization in America, it's weakening what has historically been our strength, which is the Anglo-Saxon family structure. But as of recently, the African family structure is spreading to a lot of the native Anglo-Saxon population in America, where, for example, I'm from California. When I got to go to high school, it was a lot more prominent than when I was in middle school and when I was a kid. For my classmates to come from broken families or separated parents, half of all marriages end in divorce nowadays. This breeds so many problems because previous social structures that have existed forever have been destroyed overnight, and nobody has the guide instilled in their culture or genetics how to navigate that. And given that family has this much of an impact on society, it sets up a lot of struggle for the future cohesion of our nation, namely in birth rates. And birth rates are very, very important. It's something that the West has totally ignored recently, and it's been our downfall. Notice how the most stable societies in America are these rural religious ones, which have high birth rates. As all nations secularize, its birth rates plummet, and the population becomes very, very unstable as it struggles to supplant itself. And what typically happens after this is, as society, while experiencing the hard times that the collapsing birth rates have caused, there's a radical return to traditional conservative standards for society so as to restore stability. But what's funny, because we live in a globalized period, the West has tried to prevent this radical conservative backlash. They've given the appearance that there's no population problem, that there's no birth rate problem by introducing mass immigration. Mass migration completely erodes the cultural trajectory of a nation. It creates a political time bomb. After World War II, I think we got a little bit cocky as the West, and we recognized the very real excellence that America just exhibited on a global stage for everyone to see. But with our material boom in the 50s, I think we mistook the American excellence as for being related to material things, like we had capitalism or cheap labor or, cheap products or whatever, instead of the Protestant Christianity and the Anglo-Saxon values and how these had formed this unique American culture. So like Christianity, materialism was this universal thing. It was this universal explanation, which makes sense. Every culture could accept it. It wasn't this path to success and excellence that was restrained by genetics or cultural history or that nation's history generally. All they had to do was accept capitalism and free trade, and then they could get all of these cool material goodies and technology. And now, you jump forward to the 21st century, you get President Obama acting like the reason that nations like Iraq and Afghanistan are these unstable and chaotic actors is because they don't have enough iPhones, or, they don't have enough AirPods or other technology. And, also the push in modern liberals are always pushing to expand education as this explanation for everything. Our country has a drug problem. Oh, more education. We need more education. Broken families, more education. It's this very materialistic explanation. And it makes sense. It makes sense given how our nation was formed by Christianity, this Christian outlook, where a nation could transform itself by adopting Christianity, by adopting the values that we live by, that produced this excellence, that produced the Protestant work ethic, that produced discipline, that produced Christian outlook, that's improved the lives of so many people. Not capitalism or material wealth. It's Christianity that has improved the lives of so many people. So the last thing I'll say is this. The current culture war is between radically secular vision of America's coastal elites who believe that religion is this antiquated thing. And that's what modern secularism is about. That we can abandon religion so as to evolve to our next stage of humanity. We can level up by just abandoning Christianity. It's a humanist war on religion. But humans need religion. Human beings need religion. The humanist goal of material deification was realized in the 20th century. But it turned out to be a complete failure. The promise was a complete lie. You were born into the technological project, this world that has been shielded from the struggles of your ancestors, where the West has achieved a wealth that's unimaginable in any other era. The average person has this, where you live with material goods and information at your fingertips. You're watching this right now. That's unimaginable. The average person is able to do this kind of stuff, but people are more miserable than ever. They die deaths of despair. This has never happened in any other era. Yet we live in the best era because the secular humanist technological project fails to recognize is that life means more than the physical things in the material world. As we see this actualized in America, morals, the birth rate, art, culture, and all the rest collapsed after this goal was realized. And the victims of this phenomenon have their own identity bought and sold to them. Their entire culture is specifically designed by corporations, defined only by the things they consume. And their only friends are those seeking to network connections or seeking what they can provide for them. It's like a transactional agreement. There's no real relationships. Secularization has burned social associations and interactions to the point where most people feel meaningless. They're isolated. They feel lifeless. And this is just realized in my generation. This course of secularization is making my generation's life one characterized by incredibly rapid population collapse, the degeneration of culture into social structures, and that's what's approaching us. As this dark future approaches, the religions our entire lives are positioned towards, it seems a lot more appealing to people, and I see this. I'm a Catholic convert. It's been clear to me that the overarching message of the Bible is so real. We need God. Just like in the Old Testament, the story of mankind is one of us, man, abandoning God in our own pride, and when we're doing well and we got all these good things, then realizing that we need a Savior, and in turn begging for His forgiveness. This is what America's story is looking like, if we're not careful. But anyways, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Wolfpack, I will see you next time. Merry Christmas to everybody.